You want to know my secret?
You'll be gone before 85. That's what the doctor said. I still remember the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine, as if he was already grieving me, as if he had already written me off. I nodded, thanked him, walked out of the hospital with a quiet goodbye, and then sat in my car for 40 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, wondering if that was it. 8 decades of living, raising kids, burying friends, watching the world change in ways I could barely keep up with. And now, a deadline. You'll be gone before 85. But here's the thing. Today I'm 99. And last night, I danced for 2 hours straight, barefoot in my kitchen, to an old jazz record that still crackles with joy. I'm still here. And I have a secret to tell you. They don't tell you that the hardest part of growing old isn't the aching knees or the forgetting names. It's the silence. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe but swallows. It crept in slowly after my husband passed, like a fog rolling in over a familiar landscape until nothing looked the same. His voice used to fill every corner of our home, even when he wasn't talking. His laugh, his slippers brushing the tile, the way he hummed Sinatra while cooking eggs. All of it. Gone in a moment, and the quiet came rushing in to take its place. You don't notice it at first. You think, I'll get used to it. But then days blur together. The phone rings less. The mail feels thinner. The house stays cleaner. Not because I've cleaned, but because no one's lived in it. You start counting the hours between meals just to know the time is passing. I began to forget the last time someone touched my hand, looked me in the eyes and asked, "How are you?" Really? People assume that if you've lived long, you've lived well. But they don't see the long afternoons where the sun pours into an empty room and it feels like mockery. They don't know what it's like to make tea for 2 and quietly put 1 cup away. They don't see how often I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, wondering what the point of another day could be. And they certainly don't hear the sound of the television talking to no one, just to fill the void. I stopped dancing. I stopped playing music. I stopped opening the curtains. Not because I couldn't, but because something inside me had curled up and gone quiet too. The doctors said I'd probably not live past my 80s, and for a while I didn't argue. I just faded, slowly, quietly, willingly. But one morning, one small, unremarkable morning, I heard a laugh, a child's laugh, drifting in from the street, and something flickered inside me. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I didn't know it then, but that moment would become the first note of a new melody, one that would pull me back toward the music, toward life, toward dancing again. The day I decided to take that first step was not dramatic. There was no violin swell, no bright epiphany. It was quiet, just like the silence that had swallowed me for so long. But this silence felt different. It was the kind of quiet that asked me, "Are you still here?" Not in despair but in invitation. I remember it clearly. I was sitting by the window, watching the neighbor's daughter ride her pink bicycle in loops on the sidewalk. She had tassels on her handlebars and wore sparkly shoes that flashed in the sun. She was laughing so alive it hurt. And I thought, when did I stop laughing? So I stood up, slowly. My joints complained as always. My back stiffened in resistance. My knees gave a warning crack. But I stood. I shuffled toward the old record player tucked under the tablecloth in the corner. It was covered in dust. I hadn't touched it in nearly 7 years. I didn't even know if it would work. But I needed to try. I found the vinyl, my favorite one, Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight." The one my husband and I danced to on our anniversary, every single year without fail. My hands trembled as I lowered the needle. The first crackle of sound brought tears to my eyes. Then came the melody. It was like someone opened a door inside my chest. The memories rushed in. Warm kitchens, bare feet on cold tiles, hands intertwined at midnight, whispers under blankets. I reached for the back of the chair, held on for support, and I moved. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't even dancing, not really. But I swayed. Gently, slowly. My feet followed the rhythm they once knew by heart. And for those few moments, I wasn't 88 and broken. I was 25 again, barefoot and breathless, spinning in a small kitchen with the love of my life. But then the song ended. And the silence came back. Sharp, almost cruel. I sat down, breathless. Not from the movement, but from the weight of it all. The grief. Joy. The years I had kept it all locked away. That moment taught me something. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it's a whisper that barely makes it to your ears. Child's laugh. A dusty record. A step that hurts. But from that pain came life. After that day, something shifted in me. It wasn't some sudden explosion of willpower or clarity. It was softer than that. Like a quiet knock at the door of my soul, reminding me I was still here. And maybe, just maybe, I still had more life to live. But here's the truth no one tells you. Choosing life again isn't easy when you've been sitting in the waiting room of death for years. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. My legs ached, my hips protested every move, and I almost laughed at myself. Who was I kidding? Dancing. At this age. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Wrinkled, sagging, eyes sunken with time and tears. But behind those eyes, for the first time in a long time, was something else. A flicker of defiance. I started small. 1 cup of warm lemon water each morning, instead of the usual coffee and pills. I began stretching by the window, moving my arms gently with the rising sun. I sat outside more, just to feel the air, even if no one talked to me. Even if the neighbors' kids never waved. And I began writing again. Not poetry, not stories. Just simple thoughts. Things I hadn't told anyone. About how quiet the nights were. About how it hurt when no one called on my birthday last year. About how I sometimes pretended to be asleep when the nurse came in. Just so I wouldn't have to admit how lonely I really was. I wrote because if I didn't, the feelings would swallow me whole. But here's where it gets real. One day, while sitting on the bench outside the senior center, I overheard 2 women talking about their daughters and grandkids and how busy they were. One of them, probably in her 70s, laughed and said, "I guess we're all just waiting to disappear, huh?" They both laughed like it was a joke. But I didn't laugh. That sentence hit me like a punch in the chest. Waiting to disappear. Was that all we were doing? Sitting quietly, politely, until the world forgot us completely. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about that phrase again and again. And I made a promise, to myself, to the woman I used to be, that I wouldn't wait anymore. If the world wasn't going to knock on my door, I'd knock on its. I didn't know what that would look like yet. I had no plan, no vision board, no perfect list of goals. All I had was a flicker. But sometimes, a flicker is enough to light a fire. I didn't start by running a marathon. Heck, I didn't even walk to the mailbox at first without feeling like gravity was pulling me down harder than ever. But I started with presence. Each morning I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, "I am still here." Sounded silly at first, like I was acting in a bad movie. But you know what? No one else was going to remind me, so I did it myself. Then I cleaned out 1 drawer in the kitchen. Just 1. I threw away expired canned soup, a bent fork, and a note from my late husband that made me cry for 20 minutes. But I kept going. The next day, another drawer. The 3rd day, I called the senior dance class hotline. I didn't sign up. I just called. I hung up before anyone picked up. But that call, it was the bravest thing I'd done in years. And slowly I did more. Changed my lunch. I added color, spinach, carrots, a piece of apple. I turned off the television during meals. I forced myself to eat at the table, not on the couch. You'd be surprised how powerful a table can be when it's no longer just a place for medicine bottles and unopened bills. I started journaling again, but this time I didn't just write my sadness. I wrote questions. Real questions. Who am I now? What would 35-year-old me say if she saw me today? Am I allowed to still want more? The answers didn't come easily. Sometimes they didn't come at all. But just asking them made me feel alive again. And then something strange happened. One morning after a light rain, I stepped outside in my robe to pick up the newspaper. A young girl, must have been 8 or 9, was riding her bike past my house. She stopped, looked at me and said, "You look like someone who used to dance." Froze, smiled, and I said, "I still do." 'Twas a lie. But that little lie became a dare to myself. The very next day, I finally signed up for that beginner's dance class. I showed up with 2 left feet and a heart full of terror. Everyone was younger than me by at least a decade. I stumbled, I forgot the steps, I sweated buckets. But I laughed. For the first time in months I laughed. And that laugh, it was a seed. Because here's the secret no one tells you about growing old. The world doesn't just shrink around you. You shrink yourself slowly without noticing. But you can grow again, quietly, in small, joyful defiance of time. That day at dance class didn't make me young again, but it reminded me I was alive. They say memories fade with age, but some versions of ourselves don't disappear. They just go quiet like a song paused mid-chorus. And for the longest time, the vibrant, mischievous, wide-eyed woman I used to be, she'd gone quiet, until the day she returned. It was during my 4th dance class. I hadn't missed a single week, and the instructor, bless her soul, never treated me like a fragile antique. That day, she said, "Pick a partner." And a man, George, reached out his hand. He was 83, tall with shaky knees and the softest eyes I'd seen since my husband. He said, "Mind if I lead?" I laughed and said, "Only if you don't step on my toes." We danced, and something cracked open. It wasn't romance. It wasn't even friendship yet. It was recognition. He saw me, not as a widow or as a patient or as that old lady down the block, but as someone worth dancing with, someone who chose to be present. That night, I came home and dug out an old shoebox under my bed. Inside were photographs. Me in a red dress at 32, standing on a hill in California. Me at 46, grinning with flour on my face after baking my first pie. Me at 58, holding my grandson the day he was born. I looked at those pictures, really looked. And I whispered, "She's still here." I started showing up differently. Not just at dance class, but everywhere. I wore lipstick again. I volunteered once a week at the library. I even bought a phone with a camera and learned to take selfies. Terribly lit, usually blurry, but mine. Then came the day I posted my first video on a group for senior wellness. It was just 30 seconds of me dancing in the living room, socks slipping on the hardwood floor, me giggling like a child. Got 47 likes. But one comment stuck with me. "I'm 76. I haven't moved like that in years. I think I'll try again tomorrow." That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. Loneliness isn't just a shadow. It's contagious, and so is joy. And when I dared to feel alive again, I gave others permission to do the same. I had spent years believing my story was winding down, that the pages ahead were blank. But what if the best parts of us don't belong to the past? What if they're waiting quietly for us to return? That was the day I stopped surviving and started living again. You reach a certain age and people stop asking what your dreams are. They assume you've lived them all, or that it's too late to start again. But they're wrong. Purpose doesn't retire. Wait. My new beginning came from an unexpected place. A knock on the door at 7 a.m. It was Lisa, my next-door neighbor's daughter. She was holding her toddler on one hip, juggling a diaper bag, and nearly in tears. "Mrs. Lane," she said breathlessly, I don't mean to bother you, but could you watch Ava for just an hour? I have a job interview, and the sitter cancelled last minute." Before I could even think, I opened my arms. "Of course, dear. Go." Ava was 3, wide-eyed, curly-haired, and full of more energy than I'd seen in a decade. She danced to imaginary music, asked questions faster than I could answer, and after 30 minutes, she asked if I had cookies. I laughed. "I always have cookies." That 1 hour turned into 2. Then a week later it happened again, and again, until one day, Lisa sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I didn't say much. just nodded and smiled. But when she left, I stood in my quiet living room and cried. Not out of sadness, but because I had forgotten what it felt like to be needed. From that day on, I became something I never expected in my 90s. A part-time babysitter, a storybook reader, a cookie maker, a second grandma to a child who called me Mississippi Lane and hugged me like family. Soon word spread. I didn't advertise. I didn't ask. But moms in the neighborhood began stopping by, asking if I could sit with their little ones, just for an hour or two. Said yes, not because I needed the company, but because they did. That's when I understood. My purpose wasn't about doing something grand. It was about showing up, about being a warm chair in a cold world, a gentle voice in a loud life. And that in itself was enough. No matter how old you are, there's someone who needs what only you can give. Story, lesson, a listening ear, laugh, a hug. We don't lose purpose with age. We rediscover it in smaller, quieter places. So if you're listening to this and wondering if your best days are behind you, let me be the one to say, they might just be waiting on the other side of a knock on your door. If you're sitting in your chair tonight, listening to this with a heavy heart, thinking no one would notice if you vanished tomorrow, please stay. Just stay a little longer. I know what it feels like to walk past a mirror and not recognize who's staring back. To hear the phone stay silent for days. To watch the world outside keep spinning while yours feels like it's quietly folding in on itself. Loneliness doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, slowly, gently, telling you that you've become invisible, that you don't matter anymore, that your stories are old, your body is tired, and your heart has been too broken too many times. But I want you to hear this, from someone who made it to 99, when they told me I'd be gone in my 80s. You are not done. You are not invisible. And you are not alone in how you feel. You still have something to give. Your smile, your warmth, your humor, your stubbornness, your pain that made you wiser, your joy that's been buried too long. You still have mornings waiting to greet you, coffee that still tastes good, music that brings memories flooding back, strangers who might become friends, if only for a few minutes. You still have a voice, and the world still needs to hear it. So if you're feeling forgotten, I want you to do one thing tonight. Leave a light on. Just one. In your kitchen, in your hallway, maybe by your bedside. Not for someone else. For you. As a reminder that you're still here. That your story isn't over. That there is still so much life left in you. Even if it's quiet. Even if it hurts. Even if you have to take it one slow, careful step at a time. And if this video made you feel just a little bit more understood, then I've done my part today. But there are so many others who need to hear this too. So please share this with someone you care about. Someone older. Someone younger. Someone who's pretending they're okay when they're not. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, from voices that care, that see you, then don't leave without clicking that subscribe button. This little space here is made for people like us. For those who've been through the storms. For those who thought they were alone in the dark, but didn't give up. And as long as I can still speak, I'll keep telling these stories for you. So from one heart to another, thank you for being here. You matter more than you know.